Hello and welcome to another episode of the Leo Alves Podcast. And in today's podcast episode, I'm very excited to have a guest on with me who's been on before, Hannah Norris. She's been on before. She was actually on one of the first ever episodes I recorded quite a while ago. I think that was 2021. And I think there's been like almost 180 episodes since then. So yeah, I'm very excited to get stuck in this episode, into this episode. It's been a while. She's someone I'm very much looking forward to speaking to. So I won't say too much. Assuming the listener didn't hear that first episode with you, maybe you could briefly introduce yourself and then we can just kind of go from there.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Leo. Yeah, it's great to be back on. Yeah, gosh, I think it was like around COVID time, wasn't it? My name's Hannah. I'm a registered nutritionist. My Instagram handle goes by Han Nutrition. I've worked in the kind of the fitness and health industry for about 6, 7 years now. And before doing my master's in nutrition, I actually did sports science. So yeah, kind of we obviously both work in the same kind of with the same sorts of issues, I suppose, within the kind of health and nutrition and fitness world.
Yeah, and just out of curiosity, what made you get into like just the whole topic of nutrition? What made you want to start pursuing it?
So I did sports science and really enjoyed the nutrition module that we did within that. And that was around sports nutrition. And I actually ended up doing my dissertation on sports nutrition. So that kind of built that interest from a scientific perspective. And then I was working in sports marketing and just fact didn't feel very satisfied with what I was doing. So I then decided to actually go for a job that was a nutrition role. And I had actually got very far within the interview process, but I couldn't get the job because I didn't have the qualifications required um, from a nutrition perspective. So I looked into it and I thought I basically decided to quit my job and do a master's in nutrition. But I think I've always been a foodie, and I definitely struggled with, I know a lot of people do, but as a female teenager, I did struggle with kind of body image issues, and I was always dieting. So I think I kind of had this interest in it from quite a young age. So it was really good to learn nutrition from an actual scientific perspective. And actually, it was so helpful in understanding it from my own perspective, but also kind of what people need to help with their own body image. Obviously, weight loss, but within a healthy weight loss. And then having worked then in the fitness industry, obviously being able to apply it from a sports perspective as well.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's a yeah, there's yeah, there's a there is quite a bit there. So yeah, you obviously have a lot of experience in regard to everything you've said, and obviously I can imagine that it is often where we have our like own personal struggles as to why I find a lot of people do pursue going into like nutrition, fitness,
Yeah.
exercise. That is quite a common theme, myself included. I purely just started exercising and going to the gym because I had like quite a bit of what I felt like was body dysmorphia at the time as a teenager.
Mm.
And it just kind of went from there. I was like, oh, this is actually like quite interesting. I want to make sure I'm doing it correctly. And yeah, and just like one thing led to the other. Um,
I
and
think a high percentage, if you look at the research, there's a high percentage of people within that have nutrition qualifications, either as a dietitian or as a nutritionist, that actually have come from a background of some sort of disordered eating. Not necessarily diagnosed eating disorders, but like you say, body dysmorphia, disordered kind of eating patterns, anything like that. So yeah, you're right. It's like if you've had like personal struggles, it just seems to kind of lead you into um wanting to learn more about it for yourself, some first and foremost, and then from that you can then share it and help other people.
yeah, no, exactly. And that doesn't surprise me. I've heard that before. Like it is quite a high percentage. So yeah, it's and I guess when you kind of think about it, yeah, it does. You can see why that would be the case.
Mm.
And like I feel like transitioning from your passions of when you the passion of when you started to get into nutrition and turning it into a passion, I should say. You went recently around Central and South America. You went traveling. That I felt like that was quite a while. That lasted quite a while. I remember watching your stories and just thinking,
Yeah,
wow, I wish that was me. Um,
yeah.
it looked really cool from afar, and I was like, yeah, there's so much I would quite like to ask you and speak to you about. Hence why I was like, oh, let's maybe have another podcast episode, coupled with the fact I enjoyed the first one so much, and it having been quite a while ago. Um, yeah, we can I'd like to quite go down this rabbit hole, that rabbit hole where I think it could be cool to just maybe speak about which countries you visited first, because I think it's quite an
Yeah.
extensive list, and then
Yeah.
kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I started in Brazil. I was actually away for about 5.5 months in total.
Wow, I thought it was like
Uh,
three.
sorry.
I thought it was like 3 months, but I
So
didn't realize it was that long.
I had my phone stolen in Brazil on my day on day one.
Yeah.
And then because of that, I then didn't actually I wasn't active on Instagram for about 3 months. Um, because I didn't have access to it because I had loads of issues basically. And actually my first intention was to basically try and like blog about nutrition and eating, etc. for my entire time. And then that just completely went out the window when my phone was stolen. Um, but yeah, so I started in Brazil, where I was, and then I was there for 3 weeks and went down into Argentina. And I was actually in Argentina for 6 weeks. That was where I did like the biggest stint. Argentina did like a lot of the wine tasting, and go into the wine, the kind of the wine regions called Mendoza. Um, and then I went over to Buenos Aires and then down into Patagonia where I did lots of hiking. Um, and then I went into Chile. I went actually via Chile into Bolivia. I kind of wasn't planning on going to Chile, but things change. But yeah, so I went into Chile and then up into Bolivia. And then from Bolivia, I had to skip Peru for a number of reasons. And then I went up to Colombia and then had a bit of a detour. I have some family that are in America, so I actually went to North America to go for a what they call bachelorette party. So I was actually in Georgia, Florida, Alabama, that kind of area for about 3 weeks. And then I went back down into Central America, where I went to Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala. And then from Guatemala, I flew all the way up to Seattle, where I had a wedding. And then as a family, all went up to Alaska, finished back in Vancouver, and then I flew home. So I basically did the full length of the Americas.
Wow. Yeah, that's it's very impressive. I love that. Um, yeah, there is, I'm sure, so much to say. Like just even just to start off in South, and yeah, we could even talk about Central America. Um, I've never been to South or Central America. I have been to the US, but I would imagine, and maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong on anything. Maybe the food cultures, even though it's like the same continent, I'm sure the food culture still varies quite a bit. And I would love to ask if there were like any surprises from a nutrition standpoint when you were traveling around South and Central America.
Yeah, there really was a lot of surprise, I suppose, about eating and the food available in both Central and South America. So I'd assumed, and I think a lot of people assume this, that the food culture is like really big in a lot of Central and South American countries. And actually, it's not necessarily. And yeah, there was such a variety. I kind of thought with it being a lot of, like what we consider here in the UK is quite tropical countries. You just think, oh, it's going to be really healthy, tropical, fresh food all the time. And it's really not. Um, and actually, the reality is that some of the highest obesity levels are in South America. So actually, yeah, it's there's a lot of fried food. If there's We have a culture of convenience here in the UK in terms of being able to eat pretty much anything on the go. you that again, that's not really available there unless there's, and then if it is, it's pretty much like I say, fried food. You don't have, it's not until really I got to Central America. Is in Central America, you could start getting you get your fresh fruit trucks and your juice trucks and your kind of food to go that's like pretty healthy and pretty wholesome. Not particularly, you know, ground fancy stuff. It's pretty much rice, beans, and some sort of protein, but at least it's nutritionally good for you. Whereas I think a lot of like South America, especially like Argentina, it was quite difficult. You get empanadas, but other than that, it's pretty limited. Don't get me wrong, the steak in Argentina was incredible. Which we can come on to like the differences between the places. But yeah, the steak was amazing in Argentina, like the best steak I've ever had. And consistently the best ever. It's not even like, everywhere you go is really good. But yeah, I think nutritionally speaking, there's a lot of fried food. But then that being said, I didn't go to Peru. And from speaking to other travelers, Peru was a lot healthier and a lot fresher. Um, and you, of course, you can go to your supermarket and get your fresh, like vegetables and your fresh fruit and stuff, like you could anywhere. But when you're traveling, that's not always available because sometimes you don't have good cooking facilities or you don't have the time. You might be in a city for one day and you're not gonna, go and do a grocery shop and cook and spend half your day that you're in that city. So yeah, it was definitely less of a culture that you get. So, like you go to places like Italy and the culture is all around food. I feel like there's less of that and definitely less healthy options um, in my experience and what I experienced at least.
Yeah, yeah. At the end of the day, you can only really speak from your own experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, and like you were saying, traveling around is going to be quite different because you might not even have the means to store all of that food if you were to go grocery shopping.
Yeah.
You might not have access to a fridge or a freezer. So yeah, I totally understand that having, been traveling myself. And yeah, I do feel like that surprises quite a lot of people. I feel like I was quite surprised because I thought it would be quite different. I have heard as well that Peru maybe does have like, maybe depending on who you ask, but this is what I've heard quite a lot is that Peru probably has like the best food in South
Yeah.
America. So yeah, I guess yeah. So there is that. But like yeah, I'm quite surprised. I remember I think seeing a story of yours as well in which you were saying I can't remember where you were at the time, but it was like you were quite surprised at how veg is you don't often just like veg just doesn't really seem to come with almost any meal anywhere you eat.
Yeah. I mean, so like again, so I was in quite touristy places within, say, Brazil, for example. And you could get vegetables, of course, on your like if you go out for a restaurant or if you just get like some of the local food, but you have to really like look for it and ask for it. Typically, what you'd get in say Brazil would be like rice and chips. So you'd get it, and it'd always have rice and chips. So you get a massive carb hit, some sort of like it might be just say chicken, or for example, and then some beans on the side. You might get a bit of plantain, you might get a bit of like a very small amount of salad. But over the time, the only vegetable really that you're having is these beans. Um, and that's it. And don't get me wrong, beans are really good for you, but you I think we're so lucky here to have when you go to most restaurants, you'll have some sort of side of vegetables that you can order. And if not, a lot of the main meals will come with some sort of vegetable as well. Um, so yeah, so I think Brazil was I would try and get vegetables in, um, but not always possible. Unless you go to the grocery shop, you can't get fruit in the same way. Again, I've been to Southeast Asia where fruit stores are everywhere. Argentina, steak was amazing, and a lot of places you could order roast vegetables as a side, which is what I often did. But other than that, and not every restaurant did that, but other than that, the food was really difficult to get like a good healthy meal. It's a lot of fried, a lot of pizza, a lot of even the salads were quite uninspiring. So I just did find it was very bread heavy. Um, Still ate well, don't get me wrong, the food was a lot of the time really good, but it was just difficult to get vegetables consistently. And then Colombia. So I went to Bolivia. Bolivia is a lot more plain food. Um, and a lot, again, to be fair, actually, some of the main meals I'd have would be vegetables, rice, and some sort of meat. Um, so that was actually slightly healthier again. And then Colombia, a lot of the street food is a thing called arepas, which can be quite nice. But a lot of the time they were just like it was just like plain meat and cheese inside, and that was your option for an on-the-go meal. And then when you went for food, it'd often be rice, chips, and meat again. And if you did get salad, it'd just be a little bit of salad leaf on the side, and you'd always have to be like, is this being washed in purified water? Because obviously you don't want to be having the local water because if you're not someone that's from there, I can guarantee you will be having a bad tummy at some
Mm.
point if you aren't careful about the water. So yeah. But that being said, once I got to Central America, I found Central America a lot more fresh um vegetables and fruit, a lot more like less processed, less fried food. That's my experience. But yeah, in Central, I did find it slightly easier.
Mm, yeah, and I'm sure, like you said, the food probably overall was still quite delicious. You still ate well, like even though it probably wasn't like the most nutritious necessarily, but yeah, it does still sound good. But I feel like this next part could be like quite valuable for the listener, especially for someone who travels quite a bit. And I'm really curious to ask, especially as a nutritionist as well, like who better to ask, how did you like balance or try and balance enjoying like that local food, knowing, okay, I'm only here for a limited amount of time. I want to ensure like I do enjoy it, but at the same time, like I'm kind of traveling for 5 months, 6 months almost. So
Mm.
I want to also try and stay healthy too. So like some tips for travelers that
Yeah.
you were like making a conscious effort to do yourself.
I think it does depend on the length of time that you're going away. That's the first and foremost consideration. If you're away for a short amount of time, I just think the reality is you're there to experience a culture and they're on holiday. So if you have a couple of days of not having any vegetables, you're going to be okay. Like you'll be fine. But obviously, if you're going away for extended amounts of time, even if it's like probably, I feel like even you're going away for a week or more, that's when you do need to start thinking about how can I get my vegetables in. There's a few things. I think tip number one is that you can actually get I think it's a Bimuno one. You can actually get a I think it's a prebiotic supplement that is actually designed to help reduce like traveler's diarrhea, but also help improve your gut health in terms of basically helping from a travel perspective. For those people that are kind of doing a lot of travel, going on flights and stuff like that, and you get your digestion sometimes feels a bit off. I know that that's a particular supplement that's been developed
What,
for that reason.
okay, what was
By
that exactly?
Muno.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Um, but that again, that's like a short term thing, and you can maybe use it for when you first go away traveling, but it's not something that you'd be able, well, you could obviously take it more, but you wouldn't be taking 6 months supply of it with you. Um, so there's that for people that are kind of maybe struggling with digestion and kind of going back and forth. The second thing you can do is, so water hydration is obviously very important. Um, if you're going to somewhere like Central South America, a lot of the time they will say that it is clean water, but again, it's clean water for the locals, and it's just there will still be things in there that you as a non-local will struggle with, and you probably will get a tummy, something bad with your stomach at some point. So ideally, you do want to start off by drinking bottled water or asking if they've got purified or filtered water, which a lot of the time they do. Because that's the reality is actually getting a foodborne or waterborne illness is actually going to be one of the worst things for your stomach and your digestion over the food that you're eating. So trying to make sure that you've got sanitary food is basically what you want to be looking for. That being said, street food isn't necessarily bad for you, and it's not going to necessarily make you ill. And actually, in some places, the street food is sometimes actually better and more sanitary. Um, so when it comes to food, when it comes to street food, I think making a an educated guess and using common sense to think, has this food stall been here all day with the meat sitting in the sun? If it has, maybe avoid it. Is it quite quick and they've got constant fresh ingredients? That'd be okay. So I think, thinking about those sorts of things. And then in terms of like actually staying healthy throughout that time, I think one is like I say, I definitely ate less vegetables. But what I would do is any time, any opportunity that I could eat vegetables and fruit, I would. So it's like just making the most of the opportunities where it was available. Um, and but when you are going away for extended amounts of time, I think prioritizing, even if it's like every 2 weeks, where you just have like 2 or 3 days, or you're just like sat still and you're just enjoying like a city for a few days. One, because actually you'll enjoy your travel more anyway, because you're actually like having a bit of time, like rest and like breathing space. But you can then use that time to get yourself a few meals that you cook for yourself by you book into a hostel or an apartment where you've got a kitchen and you've got access to cooking tools, and just get honestly I would just buy myself so many vegetables at that point and just like cook the biggest amount of vegetables I could. um so yeah, so I think just getting it in when you can, and also beans and other things like that are considered um obviously vegetables. So if you can try, if you're having the fried food options all the time, and if you're having the side, street food that's the fried food all the time, that's where you're going to start seeing potential weight gain or things like that are, you're not eating very nutritive foods because it's all fried. And that's what you probably don't want to be having every day, day in, day out. You kind of want to be, that still should be considered a bit more of a treat. And there are options that you can find that are healthier. It's just, being a bit more intentional about it. So yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if that's helpful.
No, 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 there is like you said, first of all, I think yeah, it's a great point to touch on. If you're not going away for very long, maybe a long weekend break, it's kind of like, whatever, just kind of enjoy yourself. You're there for like 3 or 4 days, just yeah, have fun. You'll go back to, your normal routine very soon. But yeah, if you are going away for longer, maybe longer than a week or so, then it is a good idea. Certainly, if you're going away for months, then it is a good idea to make a conscious effort to eat better because, again, you're going to be out there for quite a while. So yeah, I really like the points in which you were saying. You have to, whenever you were presented with the option to eat something
Mm.
quite good, you would take it and you would ensure you would have it. And when there were just opportunities to just have a moment in which you were staying in the same spot for a while, I think, yeah, just like bulk buying like a bunch of very nutritious foods as well is a great idea. And I'm really liking this as well, just from like my own perspective, because nothing's finalized yet, but I've been invited to, and I am hoping to go to India in February for a friend's wedding. So like even just like even though you're not speaking about India, I know I've been told a lot of like similar tips from other travelers. Similar to what you've been saying in regard to like the water, for example.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah, and you know what? I feel like to people who maybe haven't maybe traveled so much, that could sound like very just a random things to fixate on or something you wouldn't really ever think about, something you never really have to worry about until I guess you suddenly do. But yeah, these are really good points. And
Mm.
again, even just from my own perspective, I'm like just making a mental note of it all right now because again, I know I'm gonna have to focus on that soon too.
Yeah, I think another thing to consider as well is I think because a lot of people do get digestive issues when they travel, even if it is for a few days, because our gut health is so can be very sensitive to change, even if it's like a change in routine, a change in water, a change in the type of food that you're eating, you can get a bit bunged up. But a lot of the time that does change when you're back into like your routine. So, I think it's one of those things that you don't have to worry about too much. But that being said, I think I notice it myself, and I used to be like, oh, but I'm eating my salads and stuff. The problem is lettuce and I guess a bit of tomato, a bit of cucumber. Unless you're having a massive salad, if you're having a bit of side salad, it's really not much fiber. We're not, a lot of the time you think about the meals that you can choose when you go anywhere, really. A lot of the time you're not getting these high fiber foods in. A lot of the time you might be getting chips, you're not having your new potatoes, you're not having your carrots, your broccoli, your sweet potato, your I don't know, your mange two or whatever it might be you're having. There are your more high fiber vegetables. So when you're just going for salads, all of a sudden, if you're not having a lot of variety in that salad and you're just having, like I say, lettuce leaves essentially, it's really not much fiber. So again, it's trying to think. I think in India you probably won't have that sort of problem because you'll have more. My understanding is you should get things like lentil dals, chickpeas, other pulses and stuff like that, which will help with digestion. It's going to be more your waterborne illnesses that you're going to be probably wanting to avoid. So having your bottled water. But yeah.
Yeah, I really like how you've mentioned fiber actually, just because I feel like often um, when people think about like, I don't know about nutrition specifically, but I would say like just their fitness goals, it's always like protein, calories, protein, calories, protein, calories. And I feel like
Mm.
fiber is like just as important, but often gets pushed to the back seat. So was that something you were quite focused on as well while you're traveling, just your fiber intake?
Um, to be honest with you, I wasn't I think the reason why I wanted to blog about it, and like I say, I actually found I couldn't in the end because of not having a phone. But one of the things I do naturally do is just think I could look at something and be like, okay, they're my higher fiber options. So for example, going for your beans and your vegetables and your fruits and stuff. And then I'd be looking at certain things and being like, will that potentially make me unwell because of the type of meat it is, and it might be sat there for a while. I'll avoid. So I think I just made those sorts of conscious decisions as much as I could. And then I'd be like, okay, I need to get where am I getting my protein from here? Um, so I think naturally I did have those sorts of things. Calorie wise, I honestly didn't even think about calories. The only thing I did avoid was having fried food on a regular basis. Um, being honest with you, it makes me feel a bit rubbish if I have fried food too much, get bad skin, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, same.
So I think those are the natural th courses of thinking that I had. Um, and I wasn't necessarily thinking fiber, I was thinking vegetables and pulses and beans and stuff like that. But but the reason I was thinking about that was for the fiber and then also getting my vitamins, my nutrition in essentially. If anything, I probably had the lowest protein diet that I've had in a very long time. Because sometimes I would just have like I'd go days where I just have like sandwiches, because that's all I had access to. Um, like when I was going like hiking and stuff, I literally lived off of ham and cheese sandwiches, I think, in Argentina. It was either ham and cheese sandwiches or a steak and vegetables. They were my two meals that I had kind of on and off, for literally like 6 weeks. Um, so I'd be like, right, I need to get my protein in, have my steak, and get my vegetables in, have my roast vegetables, and then the rest of the time I was having ham and cheese sandwiches, which is not nutritionally balanced at all. But that's why I was like, right, I'm gonna get my steak and my vegetables in to try and like make up for the fact that I've had ham and cheese sandwiches every day for the last 3 days.
Yeah, like you said, you're aware it's not the most nutritious like option, but at the end of the day, sometimes when you are, just going on long travels, often it can just be about making do with whatever you have access to, and you can't really
Yeah,
be like, I don't know if picky is the right word, but yeah, you just don't really have a choice. So it's like, okay, I'm just gonna have this. And I know, like you said, whenever I can have a really good nutritious
yeah,
option, I'm gonna go for it. But for now, I've not really got any other choice. I'm maybe quite a bit, maybe I'm a bit in the middle of nowhere. Um, it's either this or I don't eat, and I'm obviously gonna have to eat something. So I'm just gonna have this. It's not like I'm doing this for the rest of my life. It's just a few days or weeks. But yeah, it's nice that you mentioned protein as well, because like I said, it is at the forefront of many people's minds, at least when they are trying to make a conscious effort to maybe improve their nutrition, their health, their fitness. And that was actually something I was going to kind of ask next, which I feel like you've kind of already answered. But yeah, it's I guess it's kind of like what you said about your fiber intake too, where if you could get protein in, you would try and choose it. But was that something as well you were really trying to make a conscious effort of, or not really, or like what was your approach there if you had one? Your thought
Like I
process.
say, I think being a nutritionist, I do have the benefit of being able to, on a daily basis, make decisions that I'm like, I really need to get X, Y, Z in because I know that I haven't had it for a few days. But then there'll be just other time, and like if I was making myself, because sometimes you've also got to think about cost. So sometimes I'd be like, I've spent a bit too much recently, so I'm literally just gonna go to the shop and buy myself a massive bag of pasta, a thing of tomato sauce, and then I'd be like, how am I gonna get my protein in? So I'd get myself some cheese. And that's not actually that high in protein, but I was like, I need to get at least something in. And a lot of the time I would just, if I was buying food for myself, it'd just be some sort of like cheese or eggs. If I'm honest, I barely bought any like chicken or other meat sources basically. Um and then I think it would be very much be like, okay, I've had a few days where I've had a lot of, I don't know, it could be like just low protein or low fiber foods. And that's when I'd be like, I need to get myself a steak in or something to try and make sure that it's not ideal, but I think another thing to think about is I might be kind of jumping ahead on your questions. I actually didn't see much of a change in my body in terms of like muscle loss until about month four, month three, month four. So even though I was eating lower protein and I was not training, I trained like 5 times out of in 5 months. I genuinely did it. Your body does hold on. And I guess obviously I'm lucky because I'm quite well trained. But for those people that have, put effort into putting on put on your muscle, being don't, I would say don't be too scared about the fact not having you can't get protein every single day. You don't need to start carrying protein powder around with you. You've got to remember that, eggs, beans and pulses, they are good sources of protein. So you don't have to have meat every single day. And actually, if anything, most of the time the meat and the protein isn't the issue because most of the time when you're going around, you're it's a very meat heavy continent. So if anything, most of the time the protein wasn't really much of an issue.
Yeah, I've read studies in which your like your body, and by your body I mean like generally speaking, like everyone's body, it's a lot easier to maintain your muscle and
Mm.
what you've already built compared to building new muscle. Like you can do like get away with way less, and you can get away with maintaining what you've got. So, um, looking back, I wish I understood that better when, for example, when I was like traveling around Japan, because I didn't. I did somewhat, but not to the extent like I really understand it now. And I always had this like at the forefront of my mind was like, and I feel like it did take away from my trip a little bit in some ways. But yeah, it's a really good point as well to bear in mind, and actually quite an interesting thing that you bring up in regard to you not really seeing any like real changes after only like what was it, 4 months of it, which is quite a while. I
Mm.
think a lot of people would expect it to be much sooner, especially like from what you've said, where you were training on average once a month. Obviously, I'm sure you were doing quite a bit of hiking and
I think,
walking
yeah,
around a lot, which probably did help.
the caveat is that I did a lot of hiking, a lot of walking. Um, so I was very, very active. And I think I did a bit of running. I purposely took I actually bought myself some essentially some trail running shoes. So something that 'cause you don't want to carry too much. So something that I could run or hike in. So I did keep active. It was very rare that other than the first 2 weeks, which was, you first get there and you're just partying and you're on the beach and stuff like that. Those are the first 2 weeks I didn't really do much activity other than dancing. But then after that, yeah, like I say, I did do a lot of either running, hiking, try and get myself to the gym. So it's not the same as you sitting at home, in England, sat at home at
Yeah.
your office watching TV every day, eating crap and not going to the gym and keeping up your muscle. You're still very active. So I guess you will see, and naturally you will see that loss slower anyway. And your body will change, shape might change slightly because you're now prioritizing not higher intensity, more, sorry, you're now prioritizing more and kind of
Like just
endurance.
a different style of maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So you will see a change in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. It's like yeah, it's only when you're like real sedentary where you might see that happen, like that muscle loss happen pretty quickly. I'm speaking from a personal perspective. Like I tore my hamstring in like a freak incident in jiu-jitsu back in July, and I'm much better now. Not 100%, but much better now. And for like those, I barely walked. Like I didn't really do any walking because I couldn't. For like the first few weeks, and I remember after like 6 weeks, I was like, whoa, like quite surprised at how much my left leg was like just like I could see a difference. Like again, not a crazy amount, but I was like, okay, like I can definitely see differences there. So that was interesting to see. But yeah, if as long as you're not completely sedentary, and you are doing some sort of like movement, whether it's hiking, I don't know, doing an exercise session every once in a blue moon while you're traveling, kind of doing what you can and prioritizing, maybe that fiber and that protein whenever possible. Yeah, you are gonna do you're gonna hang on to a lot more than I think you
But
imagine.
it's very unlikely that you're going to go backpacking or traveling for that kind of length of time and not be active as well. Um,
Exactly.
so like it's not like you're going on holiday when you're sitting on a beach for 2 weeks. Like most people after that amount of time wants to like do something and get active. Um, so again, that's not something I think people need to worry about. And I also do things like yoga and other forms of exercise. But as someone that weight trains normally 4 times a week, you would think that I would have lost a lot more muscle a lot quicker. Um, so annoyingly, what I've come back with is actually lost most of my muscle on my glutes, which well, not most of it, but that seems to be the bit that's gone the most. And I'm like, God's sake, um, which is frustrating. Um, but yeah, no, I would, for anyone listening and thinking about it, I wouldn't worry too much about you know, um 3, 4 months. And if you are going for longer, that's when I would think about trying to get more weight training in, just to reduce that. But they show injury wastage is very different. If you're injured,
Yeah,
physically
yeah,
not
yeah.
using that muscle at all,
Yeah,
like your
exactly.
hamstring, you physically couldn't use it, then you're obviously going to see much quicker wastage of
Mm.
that muscle. And that's very common to see. And that's why I think we have, we both come from that sports kind of fitness, science, nutrition. We've come from that background where you're taught about, injuries and the muscle wastage there. So we then assume, oh, if we're not doing weight training for 6 months, that you're going to lose all your muscle, but actually it's not actually that. It's not the same.
Yeah, it's some great points that you bring up there as well. Like that, yeah, I think is good that we touched upon them. I have like a couple more questions in mind before we like wind this down, but that I'd love to ask you. Number one, like, were there any like local like staple sort of foods that really stood out to you, like that you really loved, or you were just like genuinely surprised about in any of the countries you visited?
Yeah, so I definitely loved um I much preferred going to Central America, um because the food was just seemed fresher, and it was more plain and more simple, but it was more local, more fresh, healthier. It was very unprocessed. So it was like a very classic beans and rice with some sort of plantain or salad or something, and like some fried chicken. When I say fried chicken, like grilled chicken, not like deep fried or anything. Or you'd have that, or it would be with eggs for breakfast. So I was having rice, beans, and eggs for breakfast, which you never normally have anywhere, but it was actually really nice. And actually, what I would say is, if you think about things that are surprising, I was someone that would have to avoid beans before because I just would get a tummy ache, as I know a lot of people do. Um, and it's like any exposure to something, because I was being exposed to it every single day. I could, I'm now at the point where I can eat beans and not have any sort of stomach issue anymore. So, which is actually quite a good learning thing for me, because I was always like, you never know how much exposure you need to be able to like get over these sorts of like tummy, there's people that can't have beans, for example. But actually, that having that exposure really helped. But yeah, so I really loved that sort of food, really basic. It was always delicious. It was just flavored really nicely, really simple but nice. And then honestly, I have to say the steak in Argentina was just to die for. It was so good. Um, and then yes, I think those are probably the two um, things that really stood out for me.
I already wanted to try the steak in Argentina, but like you're making me want to try it so much more now. I've heard really good things.
It's so good.
Yeah, wow. Um, was there anything else you wanted to mention about that before I go to the last question?
Um, I no, like I say, I think I was just more surprised at. Well, I don't think surprised, but I think Central America definitely was easier to. I just felt healthier. I felt that the food was healthier. It just felt less fried. It was a lot cheaper. Um, and actually, funny, a friend of mine actually came out to visit, and she was like, even though we were, eating all the time and having, we never not she said that she got home to England and for the first time ever came back from a holiday feeling healthier than she did on holiday. Because normally you come back and you go, oh, I've eaten too much, and she's like, I came home and I actually felt healthier. So yeah, that was I think surprising. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very, yeah, it's a an interesting observation. And the last question I actually wanted to ask you, which I think is quite an interesting one, is like, did your travels at any point like or like change any of your views on nutrition, or like was there like and well, actually, there's one more question, but I think I'll ask that one first.
So the first kind of, I think for going back to, so the first question, going back to a point I made a minute ago,
Hmm.
um, I think there's that view of you having to eat something every single day, you having to have this exact amount, and if you don't train, you can lose your muscle. But actually, the reality is that unless, obviously, if you have very specific goals where you are, you want to be show ready and or you're an Olympic athlete, the reality is, as long as across, a general habit, it's not, it's a bit like the calorie deficit. If you have one day where you're in a calorie deficit, you're not going to lose weight. But if over a month that those averages of that across that month you're in a calorie deficit, then you're going to lose weight. It's the same about eating. I think it's exactly the same in terms of just generally eating. So I think it really brought that home for me. Um, because it's a sum across of your averages across over a long period that's where you're going to see the difference. Um, and obviously, like I say, not losing muscle until a few months in, that was a quite big difference. Um, it really, because I went to North America and I went to the States, it really going between the two and going back and forth, you could really tell the difference with the food. A few days in America, in the States, felt bloated. I'd look puffy. Like it is so different how it's crazy how different you feel after being in the States for a couple of days, like just like a week. That was quite scary actually. Um, and then I think in terms of nutrition, I think like I said about the beans thing, it's always that difficult. Like, oh, if really, if you do have exposure, are you sure you kind of gonna get better? But it really showed actually, like if you have beans nearly every day, you will get to a point where your body will tolerate it.
Yeah, 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 no, for sure. I've heard about that being the case as well. And regarding what you said about the US, I've not been to Central South America, as I said, but I have been quite a bit to the USA. And the last time I went to Texas, and I can relate on what you said, where I went from Portugal to Texas, and the whole time I was just like my stomach is just feeling kind of weird. like something's
Mhm.
not right. My digestion doesn't feel good. Um, and that was like literally the whole time. The food was still really nice, but my digestion was just off. And as soon as I got back, I was like completely fine again. And
Mhm.
I don't know what was going on there. If I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
It was just something that really struck me. If it, yeah,
you could tell the difference.
yeah, absolutely. The last point or the last question I actually wanted to ask as well, do you feel like from your all your travels and your experiences there, do you feel like there were like just any cultural like eating practices that you think we could learn from, we'll say in the UK?
Um, Being honest with you, I just like kind of one of my first points. It's surprising that I think coming from Europe, we do have much more focus and like social stuff around food. I think when I was there, they didn't have quite the same obsession with having all these different options and different dishes. It just, you'd go and you most of the time the menu was the same. It was, if anything, there was less variety. So I think actually it's kind of we're very lucky and fortunate in Europe, not just the UK, with actually how much good food we have and the access to that we have. Um, in terms of their like cultural, like I say, the Central America felt much more fresh, which I thought was amazing. I really liked that. And like a lot less, much more unprocessed. And the asados, which are like the big Argentinian barbecues, that was great. That was much more like bringing all bringing your family together, doing a big community food. Um, but I think if anything, I was like, actually, we do have some amazing food and amazing culturally, social experiences around food in Europe. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Was there anything else you wanted to that like you want to bring up or speak about that you think I kind of missed out and you wanted to touch upon it?
I think I've covered everything actually.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think, like I said, I think the main thing was just I was surprised that I just assumed that South America would be like all about the food and it'd be like amazing food everywhere. Because I know like Mexico, for example, Mexican food's amazing, and all the tacos and stuff like that are amazing. But it's not quite. It doesn't. And it was in Guatemala as you kind of get closer to Mexico. I was like, oh my God, the flavors are amazing. But actually, the food was quite plain. Like I was just really surprised by that, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Um, and despite the fact that they have got abundance of tropical fresh fruits, it doesn't seem to be that well, it doesn't seem to be that common to be feasting on it. Which
Oh,
I found,
really?
yeah, not really. But again, I wasn't necessarily in the really rural areas, so that could be very different. I
Yeah.
was much more in cities and stuff. So, um, but yeah, I definitely recommend it. Um, like I said, I'd love to go to Peru to try, can kind of try all the food there. Um, and I think people sometimes get worried about going away and getting being unhealthy or putting weight on and stuff. Unless you're literally just drinking alcohol and not doing anything else, you probably will lose weight when you're backpacking. You're not focused on, you're just so active and stuff. I think sometimes people worry about those sorts of things. Um, and then oh yeah, one other thing, if you are looking at like the cheaper options, honestly, pasta, tomato sauce, is cheap, but like quite nutrition, like get your protein in on top of that. But that in itself is like cheap and quite nutritionally good. So a lot of people get like the noodles, but then the noodles are like terrible for you because
Mm.
it's basically just salt and noodles, nothing
Yeah,
else.
really high in sodium, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That yeah, it sounds like it does the job, like the yeah, pasta, tomato sauce, and some sort of protein choice.
If you're just doing like cheap and cheerful and you just need
Yeah,
something quick.
yeah, yeah. No, it sounds good. Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much for coming on and taking the time out to speak to me. I appreciate that a lot. I think it's great that we've stayed in touch as well since 2019, 2018. I don't know, since we first crossed paths. So it's been a while now, and it's been great to just see you grow from afar and keep doing your thing. So
And
yeah,
and
thank you very much.
yeah, thank you.
Wh-
And yeah,
Where can people find you?
Instagram Hannah Nutrition. I have not been that active because I've just been life has been getting in the way. But the plan is to try and get back onto sharing more nutrition stuff, and I want to actually put all together a lot of this information with all the stuff that I have got lots of photos and videos that I took. Just haven't had a chance to like put it together with some like different advice for people wanting to go traveling and stay healthy.
Yeah, sounds great. I'll link your your Instagram in the show
Mhm.
notes of this podcast episode. So if someone wants to check it out, they can just click the link there. And otherwise, yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
Great. Thank you. See you later, Leo.